A Soviet B-59 submarine, armed and ready, was hiding deep beneath the waters of the Caribbean Sea, just a few kilometers from the United States. It was poised to strike, but suddenly, the US Navy found out. To force the submarine to surface, they dropped small depth bombs into the ocean. The Soviet sub, now completely cut off from its headquarters thousands of kilometers away, had no contact with Moscow. The captain believed the war had begun, and now, it was time to launch a nuclear torpedo. Tensions between the US and the Soviet Union had reached their absolute breaking point. Thousands of nuclear missiles on both sides were just one button press away. The captain's hand hovered over the launch switch. The order was almost given. But then, something happened that saved the entire world. Welcome back to Who. This chilling event unfolded during the most dangerous 12 days in modern history, when the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union nearly turned into a full-scale nuclear war. After World War II, the world had already seen the devastating impact of nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it was clear the only nation powerful enough to rival the US was the Soviet Union. They too had developed nuclear technology. Their tests sent a clear, unmistakable message to the United States. We are not Japan. We will not sit quietly. During this era of Cold War hostility, both superpowers kept their nuclear weapons on constant alert. Whether by land, air, or sea, the world knew, if even one nuclear attack was launched, the other nation would respond in kind, and what followed would make the Hiroshima disaster look like nothing. It was estimated that over 70% of humanity could perish in a full-blown nuclear exchange. To make matters worse, American and Soviet bombers patrolled the skies around the clock. Nuclear submarines HID in international waters, waiting for just one signal. The US even installed nuclear weapons in Turkey and Italy. NATO allies located dangerously close to the Soviet Union. From there, they could easily strike the Western Soviet territories. This tilted the balance of power toward America, and the Soviet Union knew it, so they made a game-changing decision. They would install nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 200 kilometers from the US mainland. Cuba at that time had a pro-communist government, something the US could never accept. To America, Cuba was practically a Soviet satellite, especially since the Soviet Union was the face of communism. The Soviets believed in equal wealth distribution, no rich or poor, and state-controlled businesses. But America? It wanted free markets, private profits, and capitalism to rule the world. The US planned to overthrow Cuba and replace its government. But Fidel Castro, Cuba's leader, had the full backing of the Soviet Union, which also supplied him with weapons. Behind the scenes, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev struck a top-secret deal with Castro. Soviet ICBM missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, would be installed in Cuba. In exchange, the Soviets would protect Cuba from any US invasion. This deal also gave the USSR a new advantage. Their nuclear warheads could now target the entire southern United States with ease. Everything was done in complete secrecy. But soon, rumors spread throughout America. Panic began to build. People feared that nuclear missiles were being installed just 200 kilometers from Florida. The White House denied the rumors, calling them baseless. But to find the truth, the US launched a U-2 spy plane over Cuban airspace. What it found? Photographic evidence, crystal clear, of Soviet R-12 and R-14 ballistic missile facilities being built. There was no doubt. The Soviet Union had brought the nuclear threat right to America's doorstep. When President John F. Kennedy saw the photos, he was shocked, furious, and ready to act. He approved a plan: launch airstrikes on the missile sites, destroy the Soviets' capability, and then invade Cuba with full force. But this wasn't just a military operation. It was a move that would spark World War III. Attacking Soviet missiles in Cuba would be seen as an attack on the Soviet Union itself. And if that happened, nuclear war would begin, and no one could stop it. When the Soviets learned of America's intentions, they too prepared for war. One of their key assets? The B-59 nuclear submarine. The same one from the beginning of this story. It had been ordered to hide deep in the Caribbean, near Cuba, and its crew had full authority to launch a nuclear torpedo, without needing approval from Moscow if war broke out. The sub had gone so deep that all radio contact with Moscow was lost. The US Navy suspected something. They began dropping signal depth charges, a form of underwater warning shot, telling the sub to surface. But the Soviet crew misinterpreted it. They believed the war had begun. Inside the B-59, the captain made a critical decision. It's time to fire the nuclear torpedo. The crew had the authority, yes. But there was one rule. All 3 senior officers on board had to agree to launch the weapon. 2 of them said yes, but one man said no. His name? Vasili Arkhipov. A fierce debate broke out. Vasili stood firm. We have no confirmation of war. This could be a misunderstanding. Launching this torpedo could end the world. Minutes passed. The tension in that sub was unbearable. And finally, Vasili's view won. They decided to surface and re-establish contact with Moscow before doing anything irreversible. At the very same time, to neutralize the rising tension, US and Soviet leadership came together. A deal was struck. The Soviets would remove their missiles from Cuba. But only if the US promised not to invade Cuba. And behind closed doors, another secret agreement was made. The US would quietly remove its missiles from Turkey and Italy. This entire standoff lasted 12 days, and the world knows it to Cuban Missile Crisis. During those 12 days, the planet was so close to destruction that both sides even launched missiles into space. Just in case war broke out, they could strike from above. Thankfully, the crisis ended peacefully. Those missiles in space? Neutralized mid-flight before they could be repurposed. And as for the B-59 submarine, when it surfaced and reconnected with Moscow, the command was clear. Return to Soviet waters immediately. Historians say that Vasili Arkhipov, the man who said no, is the man who saved the world. If he had agreed to launch, this world as we know it would not exist today. We hope you found this story from Who both terrifying and unforgettable. Don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you in the next epic video.